What is up, YouTube, and welcome to episode 89 of the Chaos Daily. Let's get into it. So, I've been a little bit slack the last few days. I've been taking a break. I mean, come on, I've been doing this straight for over nearly 90 days now, so yeah. Anyways, so LCD's going, as you can see, I have been printing. And, yeah. Let's have a talk about this. But before I do, I just want to make a quick mention for the new channel. I have started putting together videos for that channel. There's a new welcome video. Go check it out. Let me know what you think. It's not 100%, but this is the thing that I've been doing for the last month. Since I decided to start another channel, I've been just trying to think of a way to do the videos perfectly. But there's no way I can get them done perfectly, and so the videos just aren't getting done. So I've reached a point where I'm like, you know what, I just need to do something and do my best and just have to live with that. So hopefully that's all right, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. You can only do so much. So moving forward, let's get into this. Let's take a closer look. I'll try and run you through my process of looking at what happened with this and then figuring out what settings to change to solve the problem. And I think I know what the problem is, but the only way you can find out is by making another print and seeing how it goes. So let's have a look. So these are the first prints that I did. These are midsection 2, and yeah, this complete failure. The other one even worse. So let's look at this one and see if we can identify some of the failures that have occurred. So whenever you look at a print and you try and diagnose where it failed, always start at the raft. Start where the first layer starts, where it's attached to the build plate. You can just about see there are minor little bubbles. These are normal, they're fine, they're not an issue. Everything else looks pretty good. So, okay, so we got good bed adherence all the way across. Over here, the texture changes slightly, but it's still the same flat surface. So we know the raft was stuck to the build plate all the way across. It didn't peel off anywhere, so that's not the issue. The next thing we look at is the raft structure itself. It's flat. There's supposed to be like a little ridge here where it angles off from here, and you see how it sort of mushrooms, where it's flared out. So what's happened here is I can tell that where this is supposed to come out at an angle, where it's supposed to create like this sort of a shape, it's not done that. That's all flattened out. So all of that's gone flat. So we know that there was an issue around about there. And if we take a closer look at the base of the supports as well, these cones, they're not very cone-like. They're kind of squished and flattened out. So that's another point where we can see, okay, it's when it transitioned from printing the raft to printing the supports that there was an issue. These stayed attached to the FEP sheet and didn't come away with the raft. And then when it started printing another layer somewhere else, picked it back up off the FEP sheet. So it was a failure to transition from the raft material to the support material in here. This is more evident with these pieces. You can see in here, some of these raft sections did not print at all. That one in there, you can still see it's still peeled away. The base of the support is not touching the raft properly. Same thing in here. A lot of these supports did not print. You can see that one there is also peeled away from the raft. So we know that there is an issue where it transitions from the raft. So that's definitely an issue with the raft. So for this, I would say, okay, since we're having these failures here where it's not connecting to the raft, this causes a cascade failure that stops the rest of the print from printing. And this is something you have to remember with resin printing. It's the same with FDM printing. If there's a fault in a layer early on, there will be inconsistencies and problems with that layer going forward, and especially with resin printing. Some FDM printers can catch themselves. Some resin models, depending on the shape and the orientation of the model, can catch itself and fix itself later on, but you're always going to get these sort of cascades. And you can very clearly see how that cascade of failure can get out of hand. All of these supports here did not attach properly to this edge. I've separated this one off so that we can take a look at it. But if we look in close, how it would have been supported, you can see there, the supports everywhere else that they're supposed to be are touching, but where they're supposed to be touching on this edge here, they're not touching correctly. And this is where the failure happened, is with this edge of the model here. And then that's caused a small cascade, and that's started to get worse and worse. And the cascade failure gets larger and bigger all the way through. You can see all the way inside all of these internal structures. See how thin some of these are? See how they're just not printing correctly? And one of the other pieces, it shows it better. So see here where the fault started down here, and these supports did not print correctly. See how these are branched out to something that isn't there? And so this whole section had no support, so it doesn't print. This whole back plate, this black surface of the model, is up here. It's up in here. You can see this bump here. That's the support material that was supposed to be in here. That's all collapsed in there. And then it's only when later on these internal structures and this channel for the spar, because this was printing fine, the printer was able to print off of that, use it as like a support, a bridge, but it wasn't enough to catch it all. These ones failed miserably, absolutely terrible. So initially when I printed this, I just saw, okay, the print was very soft coming out of the build plate. I checked my settings. I'd forgotten to increase the exposure time per layer. So I increased it from the 8 seconds to 10 seconds, and I started these prints. Now these prints turned out much better, but again, looking in here, see these ones, this one I've not removed from the support material. None of these supports are attached to the model. They're not supporting the model. So all of this is what caused this cascade failure and all of these inconsistent lines. It's only because of the internal structure that this outside surface was able to print it all and catch itself and fix itself later on. Now this one, when I saw this one, this was printed the same time as that previous one. When I saw this one, this is when I realized, okay, it's definitely a problem with the bed. So if we look at this one, here's a good example of when a bed goes wrong, when a raft goes wrong. See these lines in here? These are bubbles. This edge, there's a gap. You see that gap in there? See how it dips in here and then comes back out. So this surface is touching the build plate. This is not. This is completely peeled off. Then there's a little bit here that's touching, and all of this is peeled off except for a spot there, a spot here, and this spot here. So a lot of this raft actually peeled away from the bed. So that was a big problem for that one. However, with this one that was printed just on the other side, consistency all the way across. This one was fully attached. But we can still find the errors with the raft. The step that's supposed to come out here, the angle, that's flattened. It's not printed correctly. The very bottoms of all of the supports are really thin and skinny. You see these ones here? They're not printing correctly either. They're not peeling away from the FEP sheet correctly. So this is a combination of, it's an issue with suction from the raft material, not pulling away from the FEP sheet cleanly. You can see in there supports that didn't print early on, they get left on the FEP sheet and then get picked up later, and you get these big clumps. So yeah, like I was saying, it's when I saw this, all of these supports that are printed in midair, they're printed later on when the support next to them, the diagonal section of it attached to it and peeled it away from the FEP sheet. None of these they were at some point, they were printing. We can see the little circles. But then at another point, for some reason, they didn't pull away from the FEP sheet and they stayed stuck to the FEP sheet. So this is the issue that I've been seeing, and it's in certain places the bed. So if we line these two up, you can see the consistencies in the errors. Where the failures are happening here, the failures are happening here. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you see some of the processes I use to identify and troubleshoot what's going wrong with the print when it's not printing correctly. Quite often it's something to do with layer times and not removing from the FEP sheet correctly when it lifts. So layer times, lifts, and how your support structure is distributed. So moving forward, looking at these prints, the 10 second per layer came out much better. I'm happy with the consistency with the 10 seconds per layer exposure. So I'm going to stick with that. But what we're going to do differently now is I've removed the raft. So I'm going to reprint one of these. And what I've done is, whereas traditionally I would take something like this and then I would orient it like this to get it shorter, so I get shorter print times, and then I would give it a bit of a lean so that I could support it with the support material. What I've done now is I've actually gone way extreme with that lean, which means I can only put one of these on the print bed at a time, whereas normally I would do the two of them. And then I'm going to be using no raft, so just small skates on each of the supports. It pretty much covers all of the undersurface with the square skates. There's enough like zigzaggy gaps between the skates in the rows of the supports that it's not a complete coverage of surface area, which is going to give me suction issues when the print is lifting from the print bed. So this is what I'm going to try next with the 10 seconds exposure per layer. And we'll see how that goes. I've never printed something with such an extreme angle to it. I don't know how the skin will hold up on the underside or the top side, but with the way that the internal structure of this lattice structure that we use inside the wings, it should work just like support material. So I don't see an issue. I've looked at the way that it's sliced, and there's no one area where there's too much surface area touching the FEP sheet at a time, so it should peel nicely for every layer. The other bonus of doing it this way is now, whereas before, when it's printing a layer of the 0.5 millimeter wall thickness, it's only printing a small gap like this. But when I start leaning it over, that gap gets wider because the cross-section of that layer is wider through that angle. Wider pixel exposure means I'll get more light coming through, which means I could technically bring my exposure time back down to a couple seconds over the default. I'm going to leave it at that 10 seconds for now and see how it goes. We'll leave it there for today's episode. Quite long. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. A bit more of explaining stuff, talky head. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. But yeah, go check out my other channel. See the new intro. Let me know what you think. Make sure you like, subscribe. And as always, I've been Chaos. And until next time, expect the unexpected. And I will see you guys later.
And a special thank you to all my patrons that help support the channel. If you would also like to support the channel, there's a link in the description.